Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gayest Generation, where we hear LGBTQ elders speak for themselves. Every episode, we sit down with a different member of the LGBTQ community who laid the foundation for the freedoms that we have today. Their stories make noise where there is silence, and it's about time we let their voices fill the room. In this episode, we get to know Ann Arbor's own Carol E. Anderson. You will hear about her experiences growing up in a fundamentalist Baptist home, what it was like to live in Ann Arbor during the freewheeling 70s, and how to make your relationship last. Due to adult situations and language, viewer discretion is advised. This is the Gayest Generation.
Hi, my name is Carol Anderson. I'm 72 years old, and I identify as a lesbian woman for the last at least 65 years. 60 years? Not 65.
Hey, it's wonderful to be here with you, Carol. Thank you. I always struggle with how to start this kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I always decide on the best place to start is the beginning. Mm-hmm. So if you could, talk a little bit about where you were born, so on and so forth.
Okay. So I was born in Detroit in 1947 to fundamentalist Baptist parents who were really wonderful human beings. I had an older brother who was actually 2 years older, but when people asked me how many children in our family, I used to say there's one. My brother was born an adult because he kind of came into the world knowing that he wanted to be an analytical chemist, and he went from the womb to his postdoctorate in analytical chemistry. So we didn't know each other very well growing up. My father became ill when I was 4 as a result of having a sore throat and then getting sent to the doctor who gave him sulfa, which he was allergic to. And that resulted in him going into a serious convulsion. And then they gave him another drug, which was to counteract that, and that put him in a coma. So the end result was that he lost his depth perception and his peripheral vision, and so he never worked again. So I also grew up in an unusual situation in the 50s, where my mother worked full-time to support us, and my father stayed at home. So there were a lot of things that were different in our family.
And for our listeners who might not be familiar with what it means to be fundamentalist Baptist, can you give us some background about that?
Yeah. Fundamentalist Baptists are conservative and rigid around all forms of pleasure, it would seem. So there was no drinking, there was no dancing, there was no cigarette smoking, there was no touching of anyone at any time for any reason except maybe in an elevator. You know, it was a very kind of buttoned up tight, don't express yourself in that sort of way in the world. So there was mostly a lot of don'ts. There were a few do's, and do go to church on Sunday, do go to church Sunday night, do go to prayer meeting, and do not sin, everything else. And just about everything was considered a sin. So it was the kind of religion where you're born into, you're bad from the start. And so you've got to spend your whole life repenting and trying to recover from the fact that everybody's a sinner and you're born into sin and there's no getting away from it. So it was a very terrifying religion, basically. And as a young child growing up in that kind of environment, you can only imagine little kids and how they envision God and how the sort of meanness that was mostly displayed. You know, God was a punishing God. God was a jealous God. God was someone to be afraid of, rather than to love. So that was kind of the framework of the church I went to. Fortunately, my parents were not, radically adhering to those things. But you ingest them nevertheless. If you go to church 3 times a week, you can't avoid those kinds of messages that really stick to you like, Velcro.
And how did your fundamentalist Baptist background, how did that play with what had happened with your father falling into a coma? Did that color his understanding of what happened? What was that like?
Well, I think my dad, was I would say my father was a much more spiritual person than he was religion. And he happened to attach himself to the Baptist religion as a form to express that spirituality. And I think he really believed that he had part of that illness was due to his failure in being a good enough Christian. And it would be like saying Jimmy Stewart in A Wonderful Life was a bad guy. If you think about my father, it was so distorted in terms of who he really was. But I think that also added to the fear factor that if God could do something like this to my father, what on earth, might he do to me?
Oh, absolutely. How did that inform your mother being the working mom?
Well, it's interesting. My mother had a very difficult life, though she was incredibly optimistic and really inspirational person. Her father died when she was 15, and she had to go to work and support her mother and her two sisters, along with another sister. And so my mother was familiar with working, fortunately. I don't know what she would have done if she hadn't been out in the workforce and really understood how to do that in an era when most, women didn't work. So I think from the perspective of her readiness for that role, certainly she had been prepared. The unexpected nature of it and the hardship of it, were quite difficult, given she had a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and then a husband who, was disabled from the time I was 4.
Would it be fair to say that within the fundamentalist Baptist teachings, does everything happen for a reason?
I think that in the teachings that I grew up, mostly what we heard, well, this is God's will, that everything was God's will. And there was no getting around the fact that if this was God's will, you didn't ask questions about it, you didn't complain about it, you didn't say, boy, this sucks. There was no appellate court to go to and say, I don't think this life is really too great the way it's gone here. Could I talk to somebody about that? So you really got the message that whatever happened to you was God's will, and you should accept that, as a teachable moment, probably, and be grateful for it. So I think that also really just shut down a natural emotional grieving process that one would go through at the loss of, anything, your father, somebody died, or you got a divorce or whatever. So I think that kind of rigidity didn't have any compassion in it either. I don't remember people saying to me, I'm so sorry about what happened to your father. It would be more, well, that was God's will, and you're so lucky you still have him. That was not very meaningful to me, as a 5-year-old or a 20-year-old. It's still not meaningful to me for somebody to say something like that, because it defies the natural human process of loss and grieving and understanding what happens when that kind of trauma occurs in your life.
Coming from a religious background, growing up Catholic, perhaps the biggest thing that I struggle with is everything happens for a reason. It's God's will. And I just find that, like you had said so wonderfully, that's just not very helpful. That doesn't help me process, doesn't help me feel, doesn't help me understand.
Well, also, if they could give me the reason, then I could argue about it. Fine, okay, if it all happens for a reason, give me the reason. Yeah. It's just some vague out there reason that nobody really knows, and that they're offering up that as an excuse for things that are overwhelming, things that are hard to bear, things that are difficult. And I think, all of us can get through anything when we have love and compassion and understanding of the people around us, even if it sucks. When somebody identifies with that and is comforting, is caring, and doesn't give you a platitude about it, then that helps you, I think, work through. When you say it's God's will, it all happens for a reason, there's no place to go with that other than stuff your feelings all back inside of you and sit down and be quiet.
The buck stops there.
Yeah, right.
It's like, quit thinking about it. It's, hey, yeah. I hear you. In my notes from our previous conversation, I have practical miracle underlined and highlighted.
Okay.
But I don't remember. Can you?
Yeah, I'll tell you about that.
Thank you.
So my parents really did have a deep faith. And so, for example, if my father had to go he went repeatedly back to the hospital because he would have convulsions in the middle of the night and they couldn't get his medication right. And so there were many trips to the hospital after the initial one until they got everything figured out. So when he would be in the hospital, the insurance wouldn't cover everything. And so my mother would need like $127 or something to get him out of the hospital. And she would just pray. And then all of the guys down at the plant where he used to work, would come over one day with a wad of cash wrapped up in a newspaper and, give it to my mother. And maybe that'd be $100. And then somebody else would come by and say, I've just been thinking about you, and write a check for $50 or something. And so that idea that without asking anybody for help, but only praying, these things would appear. And so that would be a very kind of practical miracle. I need money, get him out of the hospital, bring the money. And, it would appear through her praying. Now, there'd be many different types of beliefs that could produce the same thing. People could say,
we're all frozen together.
I set my intention, I put out into the universe. I have a consciousness that I'm asking for this money from the universe. And I set my intention for that to occur, and the money occurs. So whatever we believe is the framework we put around the things that happen to us. So for my mother, those were, miracles that were based on a belief system that then justified that belief system was true. Just like if I said, I put out the universe, I need $150, it came, then I say, look at the universe provided.
Religious confirmation bias.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah. And something I'm interested to hear more about is being within this sort of religious context, in this upbringing. When did you realize that you were some sort of, you're not looking at boys the same way as maybe you should be? When did that thought grow in your identity, and what was it? How did you react to it?
I think, I was around 15, which would probably be late for girls to be attracted to boys, in this layer. But it took longer back then, because you couldn't spend time with them or talk to them on the phone or do other things that would develop relationships. But it was when I realized that I really had these unusual feelings about my best friend on the softball team. I get all those fluttery feelings in your stomach and want to be really close to her. And of course, there was no explanation about sexual feelings in our family at all. It's not as though somebody would say, this is what it feels like when that happens, whoever it's getting applied to. It's like, wow, is this weird? I don't know if this is right. Doesn't seem like I should be feeling this way, about a girl. But I think also, growing up in that era, I became very independent very early out of necessity. And independence was not a trait that was really admired by boys in the 50s. It was total dependence was what they were looking for. Somebody who could be quiet and demure and supportive and, help their causes, whatever they were going to be, but certainly not, grow up to be a self-empowered, competent, capable woman. I remember one time somebody gave me a card for my birthday. It says, congratulations, you've become the person your mother wanted you to marry.
Oh, jeez. That's a good one.
Yeah. So I think
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I realized then that, something was wrong, and I was terrified by that. I can remember spending the night at her house one night, and, she rolled over and put her arm around me, and I thought I would set the bed on fire, like, oh yeah, whoa. And then I walked home thinking that, I had a sign over my head in neon that was blinking, sinner, 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 like that much pleasure was, totally out of bounds. So I remember, so I was around 15 then. I also was overweight at the time, and I went on a diet with my mother, and I lost like 45 pounds or something. And so I also became more attractive to boys. They, however, did not become more interesting to me. So it was, though I had more opportunities to date, I was mostly thinking about, my girlfriend while I was out on a date with them. So I thought all of those things were probably not matching up correctly. But then, I went through a phase of, really working to be within the normal range of what the society expected. And, met a boyfriend when I was 16 and was really crazy about him. And he dumped me at Christmas without any conversation or warning or.
On Christmas?
And well, it was around Christmas vacation. He was supposed to come home from college and he never
Yeah.
came home. He never called me. He never said, we're not together anymore. And it was back in the day where girls did not call boys. Your role was to sit and wait and see what happened. Well, nothing happened. And then I went off to college and then I met another woman. And then, I met another guy. And at one time I was involved both with the guy who made me feel normal and the woman who made me feel whole. But there was no way to make sense out of that and reconcile it in myself. And I was just too terrorized to give into those feelings or to really respond to them in a way that was healthy. So I even got engaged to my boyfriend in college. And I realized one day when I was sitting in a tree after I'd had a shower and all these presents, and I was going to get married in 2 months, that if I couldn't marry her, then I shouldn't marry him. And so
Wow.
I broke the engagement and I never married him, gratefully. And then, continued on this path of date a man, date a woman, date a man, date a woman, until finally I realized that, this was who I was and that I really needed to claim that. And I think at that point, as it relates to religion, I felt like I could either choose God or myself, and that I had to pick myself, because if I didn't have me, then God really didn't mean anything to me.
That is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
When you're seeing men, are you seeing men in order to hide your lesbianism? Ooh, lesbianism, that's like people say that word scary, like
I was going to say, don't
lesbianism.
say things like that, really, Jacob. You're going to scare me now.
But I think it would be helpful to for people to hear kind of where your head is at as you were pursuing these relationships with men. What's that?
Yeah, first of all, they were pursuing them with me. I was not pursuing them. But I was responding to them when they would, call. Some of the men, I think I fell in love with as I understood love. And it was a relief to have some kind of feelings for men. Those relationships were of a much shorter duration. The one guy I was engaged to was really a wonderful, wonderful man. I would have nothing bad to say about him. But I didn't have those same feelings, about him. And I think that in these back and forth experiences with men and women, I realized for me that men didn't really have the capacity to stay deeply emotionally connected for a long period of time. You could get it for a minute here or there, but it was so important to me to have a deep emotional connection with my partner. And I could always find that with women. I've often said that, most women may be heterosexual, but they're homo-relational. Their most important relationships are with women. And so it's just a matter then of society's norms in terms of what they have deemed acceptable in terms of how we express ourselves in relationship, to other people. I think actually that the trait of being straight or gay, it's on a continuum. And at one end, there's a small number who would only ever be attracted to the same sex. And on the other end, a few people who would only be attracted to the opposite sex. But there's a lot in between. And if the norms had not forever been so atrocious around making a choice of your own volition, I think a lot more people would be in more fluid relationships than they are. And I think that's what, young people are really trying to demonstrate now in the whole idea of don't put me in a box, don't put me in a pigeonhole. I'm more than that. And I think that idea is a very healthy one. I think that we have a long way to go in the true embracing of that, because the social norms are really powerful elements of our society. And I think as humans, we have a natural desire to belong. And the biggest form of rejection is to be rejected by your family, the society you live in, the people around you. And to be made to feel that you don't belong is really a death sentence. And I think that's why so many people who are identified as other, that don't feel accepted and embraced in their cultures, commit suicide, because it's like a death knell, depending on how severe those restrictions are in any given environment.
And something that you had said resonated with me. It reminded me of something from our previous conversation. You had made a distinction between one's love orientation and someone's sexual orientation.
Right.
What is that all about?
Well, I think that, we're drawn to spirits. We're drawn to an energetic force when we're attracted to somebody. And that force in its purest sense is genderless, that it is an energy that we are drawn to, and that we fall in love with that energy, with that connection with somebody. You can have sex with anybody, your sexual orientation, then you can have sex with somebody and not love them. You can have sex with somebody and love them. But a love orientation is really whose energy am I drawn to and where do I feel most comfortable and most myself? So in that way, I feel like my love orientation has always been toward women. And I've had very short forays into, being with men, but they've never really satisfied my soul, So I think it's about what does your soul need and how does your soul connect to people in ways that really nourish you.
And I think, and I see this a lot. In another life, I was a high school teacher, right? And one of my large concerns was, what are they going to say when they find out I'm a big old homo?
Yeah.
And that took about 10 seconds. And when they found out, the response that I felt that was never really told to me was what you just expressed, that it's not a binary. It's just not gay, straight, bi, like. And I think for Gen Z kids especially, oh, you're gay. It's kind of like we're all kind of a little bit gay, some way, shape, or form, or something. And that was the way I was made to feel by young people as somebody who has authority over them.
Wow.
I just say this to speak to the power of the young people.
Yeah. I think it's also, it's an indication that our world is changing. And it changes only because of all the people who had courage to come out when it wasn't okay.
Ooh.
And the cognitive dissonance that was created for people who loved someone who was gay and wasn't necessarily in favor of that lifestyle, but they couldn't both love this person and know that person was so amazing and wonderful and just be anti-gay without exploring, what does this really mean? What is this really all about? And so I think it's, it takes every generation to move that needle farther. And it's exciting to me. Never in 100,000 million years would I have imagined ever that it would be possible to marry as a gay person, ever. And so when I look at that in my lifetime, that has occurred is really remarkable. The problem is that you can legislate anything except acceptance. And you can make it legal to marry, but you can't make people accept that and embrace that and treat you with respect. And I think, everything begins with our mental models. What do we really believe? And out of those mental models, we build structures. And out of those structures create behaviors. And eventually we see the events that we see at the top of the pyramid. But it's how we think about things that needs to change in order for the structures to change. So if we only believe that men and women have this sanctity of marriage, which means 50% of them don't think it's very sanctified because they divorce and go get married again. So the arbitrary policies we create come out of the beliefs we have. So we have a belief only a man and a woman can love each other and be together in the world. Then we will create a structure that only allows them to have certain rights and privileges. And then, they will create behaviors then that sustain the status quo within the system. So when every generation, challenges that and comes out and says no in large enough numbers that you create a critical mass of sorts, then people have to rethink those things. And it's only through that process, the personal process of coming out, that leads to the political process of change and enables young people then to not stand for that. Enough has happened now that there's no going back, no matter how many Supreme Court justices Donald Trump assigns to that task, because, it's just, things have changed importantly.
And what you just said, it changed the way that I perceive gay marriage. And perhaps I'm jaded and was jaded and still am jaded. But when the Supreme Court announcement was made about legalizing gay marriage, my first thought was, this doesn't mean much to me until all conversion therapy is banned.
Yeah.
It's like, we want to fight for marriage. I really want to fight. And now what you had said allowed me to see that it's far more important than I had imagined. So I thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit as we move through the story of your life. 15, 16, you graduate high school and you go to college.
Right.
And where did you end up? What are you studying?
I went to Western Michigan University. I started out in a two-year secretarial program in order to avoid a job. Who wanted to work right out of high school? And as I got, my brother, who went from the womb to his postdoc in analytical chemistry, I thought everybody went to college, studied science and math. And when I got there, I saw all kinds of people studying all kinds of things. And then I got excited about going farther. So I got into a 4-year program in order to join a sorority, a really good reason to do that. But getting into the 4-year program, I then quit the sorority and realized I was really interested in sociology. So I ended up with a double major in sociology and business education because I had all these secretarial courses. And then I got a teaching certificate and taught for, I taught for about 4 years. And then I really got interested in how really smart people make bad decisions. And I got interested in psychology, and I went back to school and got a degree in school psychology. And then I worked as a school psychologist for several years. And then I got interested in group dynamics as a result of that. I went back to school and got a degree in organizational development. And so I really I found that all of the things that I was interested in mostly had to do with people and why they did what they did. That was always my curiosity in life. And so I finished that program, and then I started my own business as an organizational consultant, and I left my job as a school psychologist. So I went from a teacher to a school psychologist to having my own business as a consultant.
Wow. I share that same interest, and I think that's the backdrop of this whole podcast thing is I want to know your stories, why you did what you did, how you did what you did. That's what I'm trying to figure out in the hopes that we can broadcast it and have other people find out those same things.
Sure, absolutely.
Something that captured my imagination was you had spent some time in Ann Arbor during the 70s.
Right.
That sounds like a groovy time.
It was an awesome time.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Ann Arbor is like in the 70s?
Well, it was so fascinating because, the second wave of feminism, I guess they call it, was just in full bloom. And there were people coming. I remember being at the Power Center with Gloria Steinem and Alice Walker and Kate Millett. I mean, they practically set the building on fire with their passion. And so finally, women are talking about the things that all women knew about forever, because we've all been discriminated against. We've all been put down. We've all been, pushed aside. And finally, women were articulating the structures that created those kind of dynamics, in the world. There was also, it was really a time of, free love, sexual exploration, but mostly for straight people. It wasn't a time to say, hey, be gay, that's a great thing to do. It was more about having open marriages, not having to be married in order to have sex with people. It was a very dynamic time. There was a lot of, political stuff going on also at that time. And it was just, you felt like you were alive and that the world was changing. And you also felt like you could change the world. I mean, there was a real sense of empowerment in that. So we were going to women's workshops on all kinds of things, and women had stopped wearing bras and were wearing overalls and stopped shaving their legs, and they weren't going to be under anybody's control for anything. Whatever men expected of them, they were going to do the opposite. Whatever the society expected of them, they were going to do something different. And so you felt like you were part of a tribe that you had always belonged to, but had never met. And I think for so many women who were really, I remember when I graduated from college, Ford Motor Company did not have they used to have a college graduate program, to start young people in, but it was only for men. And I could not get a job at Ford Motor Company as a college grad. I could be a secretary to a guy who graduated in the same class as I did, to him, and making, like half of his salary if I wanted to work, in that situation. I have one of the best things on my wall back there. You can see it underneath the tiger. On the left side is a letter. And my mother had worked at Ford, and she'd wanted me to get a job there. And so she had written to the head of the personnel. Her name was Nina Oldham. And so she set me up with several interviews. And I told my mother I did not want to be a secretary. I'd gone to college and I had a teaching degree, but there was a real glut of teachers. It was hard to get a job. So after she sent me on all these interviews and they didn't work, I made her a collage, and this beautiful thing as a thank you gift for her setting all those things up. So she wrote me this beautiful letter that said she loved the collage and how wonderful it was that I gave it to her. She assumed that, I was just a little too different and unique to be in the corporate environment, but I was such an interesting, creative person. She wished her daughter was a little bit more like that. It was a lovely, beautiful letter. I was 21 years old. So I never took the job as a secretary. And the thing on the other side of it is a gift that was given to me by my client at Ford Motor Company as a consultant for a global project that I had worked on as an external consultant. So those two things side by side, one is written in 1970, the other one is written in like 2017 or something like that. So it was really, to me, it's a real statement about sticking to what you really want to have in life and not capitulating no matter what anybody says is possible or not possible. Never in a million years would I have thought I could turn down a job as a secretary at Ford Motor Company and return as a consultant on a global project, some 30 years later or 40 years later. And so I feel that if people are thinking about what do I want to be, how do I want to be it, the best advice I would give is to keep tuning inside and not outside. Keep tuning into your heart. What do you love? What matters to you? What do you care about? Why are you here? What is your point? What is the point of your life here? And to really get in touch with those things that you love. People give you all kinds of advice, about, well, go into the stock market, you make a lot of money. Well, if you don't love the stock market, you actually won't make a lot of money. You make a lot of money doing the things you love, no matter what they are. And you become masterful at those things. And if you don't make a lot of money, you create a lot of joy in your life. And, if you live to be 80, you actually have 29,250 days on the planet. It's not many days if you count them all up. So you don't want to spend any of those doing things that you really don't love or that don't matter to you. So I think, confronting being gay in a society that doesn't approve of you makes all other challenges you have seem easy. Like following your heart, finding a job you love, piece of cake. Being hated by the people around you, that's more difficult.
Yeah. Oh, what a full circle moment. And I think that especially, and how many times have you heard this, especially in trying times, like, whatever you want to call what we're living through right now, that message is vital. That message is life or death during these uncertain times.
Absolutely.
So you complete college. Where's your gayness at during this time? Is it in a box in the closet? Are you carrying it around in your purse? What's the metaphor?
I get out of college. I'm so far in the closet. I'm under the shoes and the clothes. You couldn't find me in there even if you looked. Still trying to be okay. And I, so that was all the way up through my teaching career. And then when I quit teaching and went back to school, when was that? I was about 26 then. And I finally met a woman in Ann Arbor in the 70s, in this period of time, that really opened my eyes to all the ways there are to be in the world. I think whatever system you grow up in as a child, you think that's all there is. You don't really realize the vastness of this world. You don't realize that these are just beliefs that people have, and that beliefs, arise out of somebody plants them in you. You don't come with beliefs. You come really kind of as a fresh slate, and then people start telling you what to believe and how to believe and who you should be and all of those things. So I think coming to Ann Arbor really was a turning point in my life. And I also had started traveling. So I'd gone to Europe, did a backpacking trip, went to 13 countries, for 3 months on Rail Pass. And you really go to a different culture. It just opens your eyes. You just see how limited things are here. So I think those factors really made me believe. I had such negative images of gay women. It was like they all rode motorcycles, smoked cigarettes, didn't have jobs. I don't know where I got those images other than in the zeitgeist they were hanging around. And so I just, I couldn't imagine myself in that tribe. So when I came to Ann Arbor and I found these really capable, competent women who were professionals, who were interested in things that I was interested in, who were like me in many ways, then I felt like this is a place of belonging, and we were changing the way people looked at women in general. And I think I was certainly a radical feminist from the time I was 8 years old, and my brother could have a paper out and I couldn't. It was like there's something wrong here for sure. And finally, the world kind of caught up to what I thought was right. So being engaged in those things, meeting other women, really seeing that these were choices that I could make, and that wasn't a choice that was aligned with who I was. And so that was really the beginning of freedom. I'm sure, also I worked as a school psychologist, so it wasn't the time to raise your hand and say, oh, by the way, I'm gay. But there was a social worker and myself together who ran a parenting group for all of the straight people in the system. And both of us actually were living with women who had children. So we were parents of a sort. And we knew a lot about how hard it was to raise children. But that's not something I really broadcast at that period of time. It wasn't. You could lose your job for that. I mean, in the era I grew up, you could, it was illegal. You could be arrested for that. You could be put in jail for that. You could lose your apartment. You could lose your friends. You could lose your family. You could lose your job. And so being out was not a really comfortable proposition. I really thought carefully about who I told that information to, not because I was ashamed of it at that point, but because it was frightening to live in a world where those basic rights could be snatched right from you and destroy your life, essentially.
And if I understood what you were saying correctly, that there was a time in which you were in a relationship that you came into a relationship and there was children involved.
Yes.
This term instant family, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and what it's like to be a lesbian coming into an instant family?
Well, I think also, that was back in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
So there were no role models for women who were doing this. And in order to preserve some level of protection, I was also referred to as their housemate. I wasn't their mother or stepmother or any of that. I think that, I was certainly a member of that family, and I belonged and was loved by the members of that family. Designating me as a housemate also is a certain statement about your level of belonging in that system. And I think that out of the need to protect yourself, protect your kids, protect whatever, then you make choices that in retrospect really were alienating in the sense of the fundamental sense of belonging. Now, also in that period of time, the woman's husband was remarried, getting remarried. So now we have the real stepmother, we have the mother, we have the dad, and then we have me. And one time, my partner was out of town, and so I went to the school parent-teacher night. And of course, I only went because it was important to them, the kids, that I go. So now I'm in a room with the husband's new wife, the ex-husband's new wife, and me, neither of whom are the designated mother. I'm sure people are thinking, okay, well, the real mother, please stand up. Who are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? Nice to have you. Trying to be very, very inclusive, but, not really sure what's going on. So there was always this tentativeness around the role that I had in that system, not from an emotional perspective, but it turns into an emotional perspective when you think about how the world views you, what they assume about you, and how you view yourself, in that context.
Mm-hmm. And how did that experience lay the path to new relationships? What did you learn from that informed how you, your relationships in the future?
Well, I think one thing also, remember the times are also changing as things go on, but I determined I would never lie about who I was to anyone again. I would not act as though I wasn't who I was. I wasn't out broadcasting it, but I would never create a scenario that would lead people to believe I was anybody other than who I was. Even back then, you would, if somebody lived with you, you would have 2 bedrooms, and one would always be made up as though that was the other person's bedroom. All forms of lying and deception that are designed to keep you safe. And I think they erode your basic sense of dignity by pretending that you're somebody that you're not. And, when there are really good reasons to be afraid, it's not that was an unreasonable fear. It's not that I was having paranoid delusions. I was actually living in the United States of America, where all these things were true. So it's weighing out then the value of my life and how I want to spend it, not in jail, thank you. Not without a job, thank you. Not without friends, thank you. And how will I navigate this in a way that is honorable? And I think my book really speaks to that. I wrote a book called You Can't Buy Love Like That, Growing Up Gay in the 60s. And it's really about how do you live an authentic life while keeping a secret? And you can't, basically. And so realizing the cost of that secret to me in the friendships I lost by not really being open and honest. You can't be intimate with people, and I mean emotionally intimate with them, without telling them who you are. And you can't have deep relationships without being vulnerable and emotionally available. So I think that when I really looked at the cost of not telling, that's when I realized it was greater than the cost of telling. That people would accept me or reject me eventually for my personality, for what they liked about me or didn't like about me. And if that was going to be the reason they rejected me, they weren't my kind of friends.
Yes.
You know, somebody gave me a great sign in my office. It says, "You will be too much for some people. Those aren't your people." And so getting clear about who's your people and who's not your people enables you to make choices then that are aligned with what's important to you, that nourish you, and that uphold your sense of belonging and purpose.
Yes. That makes me recall situations in college even. This is what, 2011, 2012, in which I engaged with some fraternity brothers, and I was not allowed to go to a certain place because I'm a big old homo. And I said, "You don't like me because I'm gay, not because I'm loud, annoying. Yeah, you don't like me because I'm gay? What about all this other stuff?"
Yeah, really.
And it's kind of like, what? You're not even seeing it right, you know?
Right, you're misguided here.
Yeah. There's so many other reasons to not let me into this party.
Better reasons.
But this is the one.
Really better reasons. Come on.
Yeah. And let me give you a reason too, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've thought about so much since we first met was you had come up with your current partner a set of rules, a set of understandings that guide your relationship.
Right.
Do you mind sharing some of those understandings with us?
Well, I think after both of us have been through a variety of relationships, and I've often wondered about how long does it take somebody who's gay to really form a positive, healthy relationship in a context where nothing is positive and healthy that surrounds you. So it really took me a while to get it. And yet I think there are fundamental things about all relationships that if you really looked at them and designed a set of agreements, you'd be a lot healthier. So when Archer and I met, we really started looking at and asking the very first date we went on, because I'd read this book called Conscious Loving by Gay and Kathleen Hendricks. And
the very first date.
Very first date.
Oh.
Because I'd had enough other bad dates in my life to know what I was really looking for now. And I said, in this book, they talk about most relationships are based on assumptions instead of agreements. And I would really like to explore together, what do we think is the purpose of relationship? What is the point of it? And to explore what kind of agreements would we like to lay down in terms of how we would explore being together. I jumped into too many other relationships without really knowing who that person was or what I needed or they needed. And so we started out by saying that we thought that, primary partnership was a spiritual path, and that you found the person who both you were deeply drawn to, but also had a set of things that were necessary to help you grow. And that the intersection of those things would be the places that you could come up against and would either really make you and help you grow or would break you, essentially. Everybody's got issues. Anybody who says they don't are in such deep denial, they're going to be really shocked when they figure them out. So it's not like there's something terrible about having a past, about being wounded, about being harmed in life by carrying those wounds with you. So based on that idea that it's a spiritual path, then what kind of behaviors did we want to exhibit in this relationship? So we thought about all the things that never worked in our relationships and the things that did work, and then crafted a set of agreements out of our understandings. So they were things like we would never use our vulnerabilities against each other. The quickest way to kill love is to take somebody's precious heart and walk all over it with your cleats on, because you're pissed off in the moment and you want to really get them for some reason. And doing things like that really destroys the possibility of building and really creating a lifelong treasure. So to make ourselves accountable to these things, I would have to say to myself in a moment of frustration, I'm going to choose not to do that. I'm going to make a conscious choice not to weaponize this, even though I'm angry and upset. So we had other things like we would tell the impeccable truth with love as soon as we knew it ourselves. We had found that oftentimes in relationships, people don't bring up the little hurts that happen. But every time we get hurt or feel disrespected or not seen, it matters. And it doesn't go away until we talk about it. It doesn't, no matter how big or small it is, it doesn't matter until we say, that really hurt my feelings. I want to talk about what were you thinking when you did that? This is how it impacted me. And so it was always time for the truth was a major agreement, whether it's your birthday, Christmas, Sunday, doesn't matter. That truth is the most important basis for our relationship, and that we would tell the impeccable truth to each other with love as soon as we knew it ourselves. That we would, when we had a disconnection or argument, we would look first inside ourselves to see why we were being triggered by that. And then we would have a conversation about what was going on inside of us, rather than looking outward and say, you did this, you did that, doesn't matter. We also decided in building our home that we wouldn't have anything in our home that we both didn't love. So in our own offices or rooms, we could have whatever we wanted, but that we didn't want to compromise and be in spaces that somebody loved something the other person didn't. There's so many objects in the world, you can find something that everybody loves, and it really eliminates, a lot of arguments that way. See, what else did we have? That we would have, we called it easy. We'd have exclusive sexual intimacy that we wouldn't, so that was ESI. That it was really important to honor the sacredness of that part of our relationship and that we would not violate that. And that we would nurture and build that as a part of the beauty that we wanted to have in our lives. So those were some of the major things that we made agreements about, and they became the most incredible foundation for our life. If you set out, it's an aspiration, this is the kind of relationship I want. I want to live in a peaceful house. I want to live in a place where people tell the truth. I want to live in a place where I'm safe, where people don't use my vulnerabilities against me. I want to live in a place, where somebody helps me grow and challenges me in appropriate ways. And by doing that, when you're not in a big argument, you then are making a commitment to this relationship that you are willing to be accountable for. So if I'm not telling the truth, that's on me. If I'm using your vulnerabilities against you, that's on me. If I'm not, looking first inside of me, that's on me. So it's all about building 100% accountability in yourself for this relationship you want to create. And I think people fail to understand there's a me and a you, and then there's an us. And that us is made up of the me and you. But it needs to be tended to. It needs to be treasured. It needs to be respected. It needs to be nurtured, for it to really thrive in the world. So we made those agreements 19 years ago when we got together. And then they became our vows when we got married. And for the first year or so, we would read them every month. And we would say, sometimes we'd read them every week and say, well, how are we doing on this? Well, we could do better on that. I'm sorry I didn't kind of do that. We also wrote a statement about our home and what we wanted our home to be. And that included things like a place where we would proudly bring our friends and people who were in our life, a place where the inner kids always got their way too, that their voices would be taken into account, and a place that we would forgive over and over and over and over again. And I think, in all relationships, when you love someone, you have to be willing to forgive them. We're imperfect beings. And even when we lay out things and do our best, we still make mistakes. And mistakes are repairable if we put in the effort to repair them. So often, defense is our response to hurting somebody, rather than really looking and acknowledging that hurt and, forgiving each other for those things. So in these 19 years, I can honestly say, and if Archer were here right this minute, she would say also, I don't think either one of us have ever used our vulnerabilities against each other. There have been times that it's been harder to tell the truth in the moment, but we keep working at doing that. And usually the moment might be an hour later rather than the exact moment. But they've been such a great foundation. And I think what has come out of that, we have no leftover baggage in our relationship. Nobody's bringing up, last Tuesday when you did this, or remember 10 years ago, when you did this, or 5 years ago, and sometimes we'll bring up things that, are hard to bring up because they seem so small, like the way somebody spoke in a certain tone of voice or something. But what we find out is when we engage in these conversations, we discover that there was something else going on that was underneath that was really kind of buried. And so it's always been illuminating to find the source of the difficulty. It comes out in a certain way, but usually there's something underneath that. So if I were going to give anybody relationship advice, it would be... That
was my next question.
Get that book and sit down and really talk about what do you want to agree to in how you create this work of art. And if you think about your relationship as a work of art, that both of you are impacting and creating this work of art every day with your actions, with the words, with the way you engage, with the way you talk to each other, the way you hold that person, with a level of respect and kindness. We also have practices we do. We have mystery dates where we, each month, one of us plans a date for the other person that the other one doesn't know about. And so
I love it.
It's a mystery date. And
what's been the most mysterious mystery date? What are some notables?
Wow. Well, let's see. Boy, Archer took me on some great mystery dates. Well, one time she, I'll just name a few she's done. Mm-hmm. She took me to a golf driving range and hired a golf pro to come and, teach us how to, hit some balls, which was really beautiful. I'm actually taking her on a 5-day mystery date this coming up week. And and I'm taking her, I know I can't tell you because it's a mystery date. She'll probably find out. But sometimes we'll do really elaborate ones. Let's see. Oh, for her 60th birthday, I took her on a mystery date up to northern Michigan. She's from Virginia. So I took her up for about a week and we went through the Sioux Locks, which she had never had a chance to do before. Whoops. Okay, now I have to send a text to her because she's calling me and she never calls me unless something's
Absolutely. Happened. You do what you got to do.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Ain't no thing.
Okay, let's see. I just want to make sure she's okay. That's all. Okay. I said, on the interview now, are you okay? Okay, so I took her up to the Sioux Locks and she'd never seen anything like that, with the big boats coming through. And she loves to sail. So we went across I took her to Mackinac Island. We rode bikes all around the island. And then I took her sailing on Lake Superior, which was really like a huge highlight for her because she loves to go sailing. So that would be like a big splash. And then I arranged for her sister to fly up and when we got home and come for the weekend, and our niece and nephew, and they all dressed up in disguises, and we, met at the bar downtown, and they were sitting across there, like a mad professor and somebody else, and I kept looking at her, and then they'd move a little closer, and, and finally they, oh my God, it was a big surprise. So that would be a really elaborate kind of mystery date. So last year, usually for our birthdays, we'll do something also that's kind of a big mystery date kind of thing. Yeah.
And I was, perhaps I still am a little bit, in the school of belief where it's like, love like that's just not going to happen for me. But no, it's going to. And if I approach it from where you're sitting, from where you're seeing, taking into account the rules and understandings that one needs to have a healthy romantic relationship with somebody, It's most certainly possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jacob, it's, and I think it's getting clear. What is your vision of a relationship? Start with your vision. What do you want? What's really important to you? And then what does it take to create that? And, I've often said, to Archer, my most important job with Archer is letting her know every single day what an incredible human being she is and how lucky I am to have her in my life and what a beautiful person she is. And every morning we take a bath in the big hot tub and we go through this exercise called Show Me Your Heart. So it starts with just show me your heart, like what's in your heart today. And you keep asking that question over and over again. And then we do appreciations often. I'm going to tell you 5 things I really appreciate about you. And it's amazing.
Who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't want that? And it lifts your spirits. And to feel like it's so important to feel loved and respected and admired by your partner. And so all of these things, I think, reinforce a sense of specialness, that if you get the love you want, then say thank you. That's what Harville Hendricks says. If you get the love you want, say thank you. And I don't think we look at love as, first of all, an amazing miracle if you're attracted to anybody, if all the thousands of people you meet in your life. But when you find that, then how do you treat that kind of treasure? It doesn't mean that we've had plenty of very important conversations that were loud and that were not always very well understood in the moment. But we know that our fundamental commitment is to really learn and grow and understand each other and take care of each other in the most basic ways that we can around love and safety and kindness and goodness.
You said kindness. Wow. Yeah. How many times can I say kindness? Kindness, kindness, kindness. It is the big difference. It is the big difference maker.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thanks for asking me.
What is the biggest difference between younger and older LGBTQ folks?
Well, okay. I think that older, like myself, are still in the process of eradicating the enormous prejudice that they grew up with. And in that sense of really being free. I see, younger people, walking down the street holding hands as though that were the most normal thing to do on earth. And Archer and I hold hands around Ann Arbor. But when we go to a place that we're unfamiliar with and we don't know what people think about it, there's an automatic thing that goes off. That's like hyper alert. It isn't safe here. We don't know. And we go into a mode that's automatic, that I think is one that's been programmed in us forever. So I think that could be a difference. I think about, we have some young friends who certainly are so out in the world in a way that we never could have been back then. And I think whatever set of things you're imprinted with, they become a part of your cellular structure. They aren't just ideas, they're embodied in you. So I think those would be the primary differences, I think, if I were to ask a lot of older lesbians versus younger ones. I think it's about freedom and an inherent sense of freedom that we never had a right to, really.
And I'm interested to know, what do you feel about younger people using the word queer?
Well, it's interesting. It's one of those words that was a real devastating term that was used back in the day. And so it still has an offensive sound to it, to me, because of that imprinting way back when.
Oh, there's some dogs afoot.
There's a dog trying to get in there. And I realized that they're trying to take that term and make it into something different. But I think it goes back to that what lives in your cells. You know, that was a really derogatory term that was really used to punish people and announce their sense of not belonging. So I'm not a fan of that word. I'd like a different one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you have a gay icon growing up?
A gay icon?
Yeah.
What would that be? A gay icon?
And what I've learned is that the way that my generation throws gay icon around,
yeah,
it's like, for example, a gay icon for me might be Beyonce. It might be Cher. It might be Ellen DeGeneres. Okay. And what I'm learning is that this question isn't good because back in the day.
Okay, let me tell you, Jacob, I'm a gay icon.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
I don't have one. I am one.
Put it on your tombstone. That's it. Right. Oh, my life span was just extended 5 years because of that answer. Right. What stereotypes about LGBTQ folks bother you the most?
I think people who don't take pride in their appearance. I think, and that's a part of my raising from my mother, and certainly in this day and age, a lot of people don't take pride in their appearance. But I think how you present yourself in the world also illuminates a lot of things about you. And I think when you are in a non-privileged position, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing everybody who is a part of that group. And that when people look like they don't take care of themselves, they don't care, they're sloppy and ill-kempt, then it doesn't reflect good on me. If that's sort of the major, and I'm not saying it is the major, but I think those are things that also bothers me when I see straight people, who are like that. But I think in particular, we will be judged for everything. And, I think there's something about pride in yourself. Whatever your style is, it doesn't really matter. But to show that you have some pride in how you look and how you present yourself in the world is important.
Have you ever used a dating site or app?
Fortunately, I fell in love before they became really popular. And so, no, I never have.
Sometimes I think I'd have more luck without it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we did it the old-fashioned way. You actually meet people in person. You have a good time. You're not like hanging your resume on your face, and they can find out right away how much of a bullshitter you are if you're really the deal. You don't have to wait for pages.
There's also so many indescribable things that a picture cannot tell me, like the way somebody moves, the way somebody talks, the way they react to things. I find all those things more attractive than a picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could talk about it forever. I could.
Right. Yeah. So I'm out of that game. That'll probably never happen in this lifetime.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I always said, Arch, I would never, ever, ever leave her. I would be the biggest dumbass on earth. And I don't like to think of myself that way.
Yeah. Hey, when you got a good thing, you hold on to that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Who was your first celebrity crush?
Celebrity crush. I've never really had celebrity crushes.
Yeah.
So there's nobody that I really was totally taken with or felt I was crushed out on. Archer's my celebrity.
Yeah. You're the gay icon and she's the celebrity crush.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. What was your best Halloween costume?
One time I went with one of my friends as a kite and a little kid, and she was the kite and I was the little kid, so I was flying.
I love it.
Yeah.
What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I think I feel really hopeful when I see young people who are responding to the world in really intelligent and thoughtful ways. and who see the world as larger than themselves, who are interested in creating community, who understands that we are either going to really sink together or we're really going to fly together. It gives me hope when I see people caring for other people. It gives me hope when I see, I'm sure you've seen some of these hundred thousands of choruses that are on Zoom now singing different songs. And the way some of them are done so beautifully, and you see all of these individual people of every stripe and color and type. And it gives me hope to see that many people joined together in a single voice, involved in music that creates beauty. And I think that it's emblematic of what we could do around so many things if we could really see the world as a place that we need to care for, that we need to look out for people who have less than we do. If I am privileged as a white person, I need to fight for people who don't have privilege, who are Black, who are brown, who don't have the things I have. If you're a man in this world, you need to fight for women, who don't have the same privileges as you do. If you're an able-bodied person, you need to fight for the privileges of disabled people. And I think until we can see ourselves in that kind of unified way, we continue, and right now we're getting the poorest example possible of I, me, my, I'm the only one on earth, as demonstrated by our mentally ill leader-in-chief.
Indeed.
So I think that when I see those things, I feel a lot of hope about that. I remember when the shootings happened in the school down in Florida, and there was a young woman who I think it was a Latina woman who had very short hair, and she got up and she talked about, I call bullshit, I call bullshit, I call bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I think, to have that kind of clarity and purpose and to speak your truth in that way and find a purpose. I have hope when anybody is living from a meaningful purpose, that involves others. So, and music gives me hope, I think. Music always lifts me up.
What is the best age?
The one you're in.
Yes, indeed.
I think about, there were so many great things in my 20s. I had some really great times. And in my 30s, I worked a lot in my 40s and 50s. I'm having a really great time in my life now. I think the only moment you got is the one you're in. And to really learn to embrace and love this space, whatever it is, and what you can learn from it here. I would like to be 20 again and have the wisdom I have at 70. It's not usually an option. But, the only thing that's hard about aging is loving life and loving the world you're in and knowing that it's a terminal event and the time ahead of you is shorter than the time behind you. But the beauty within you is what makes the difference.
You get to have dinner with 3 people, alive or dead. Who are they?
Alive or dead. I would say I would love to have dinner with Maya Angelou. I would love to have dinner with, let's see. Trying to think about the people I really admire. Nelson Mandela. I'd love to have dinner with him. And I love to have dinner with my darling.
If you could ask me any question, what would it be?
It would be, what is it like for you to be a gay man, a queer person, whatever you call yourself, in this era, and what is your experience like?
I'm one of those people, I was afforded certain privileges because of my race, but also because of that I was just kind of accepted by my family instantly. Mm-hmm. With that came a whole other set of privileges. So my understanding of being a queer person, of being a gay person is like, how do I give back? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the central thing. That's the thing that drives what I do and how I do it. And that could be in interpersonal relationships, in a professional setting like this. I just try to give back, and what I try to be most of all is grateful. I don't always succeed, but I think the trying of doing that is what I'm committed to. I just try to keep in mind how lucky I am and how grateful I am. And also, being gay is a lot of fun. I have so much fun being gay, doing gay stuff with my gay friends, being all sorts of gay. And that's a privilege that I'm afforded because of the things that the lives that you've lived. So for that, I say thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think I just about asked you every little thing I had. Can you tell us again about your book? What's it called? Where can I buy it?
Yeah, it's called You Can't Buy Love Like That, Growing Up Gay in the 60s. You can buy it at mostly on different online outlets. It's available on Amazon. It's also available at Barnes & Noble online. It's in audio version. There's a Kindle, and there's also the paperback. There are not a lot of independent bookstores that carry it, but you could probably order it from an independent bookstore, which is always desirable, given the world we're living in. But you can get it at all of those outlets. And if you're really interested in learning about not only a historical perspective about the experience of being gay, but more importantly about the impact of living with a secret and how that affects your ability to be authentic in the world. And so I think it's also a book. It's won quite a few awards, and many of them have been just for memoir and not necessarily in an LGBT category. So I feel like it's a book that appeals to a broad range of people, and I think it's a good read. It goes quickly. It's not difficult to read, but I think it's a really wonderful book. I feel really proud of it. I feel proud of having written it, and I feel proud of the content of it. So go buy that book. It's a great night to spend reading about my life.
That's fantastic. And it's my hope that by the time this is out into the public atmosphere, that the library here in Ann Arbor District Library, we're going to pick up a couple of those books for people to check out as well.
That'd be great. I actually saw it in the Ann Arbor Library when it first came out, so I'm wondering if you still have a copy of it. Yeah.
We might have already got it.
Right, but get a few more because there'll be a lot of people coming down to get it.
We'll pick up a few extra.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, Carol, I thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing about your life and also just the immense amount of wisdom. I feel like I just Oprah vibes. I just feel like I learned so much, and I feel like I'm a better person for it. So I want to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me be a part of it. I really appreciate it. It's been a real joy meeting you and having this chance to talk about that. I also never dreamed in my life somebody would call me up and say, come and talk to me about your experience of being gay back, 100 years ago. So you made my day with that. So
I'm very glad to hear it.
We want to give a special thank you to Carol for sitting down with us. Be sure to check out her memoir entitled You Can't Buy Love Like That, Growing Up Gay in the 60s. For more podcasts like this, be sure to check out aadl.org. And I would be remiss to not mention that you can now listen to The Gayest Generation on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, as well as Spotify. If you or someone you know is interested in being a guest on the show, email thegayestgeneration at aadl.org. Again, that's The Gayest Generation at aadl.org.